The theme this morning is intentionally grateful. Dis reg, dankie Tannie. Aspres dankbaar. This week you saw probably the interview between Zelensky and not Putin, Zelensky and Trump. And you see a lot of things, and you see like Trump is saying you're gambling with World War III, and you're so overwhelmed with what you see during the week. You're so overwhelmed when you look at your television and you look at the things around you and people and the way people sometimes treat you, the way people say things, the way people do things. And we are so much like in fight or flight. Ek dink ons is so baie in situasies waar ons we want to fight, and what do you want to do? What is the threat? What is the... And somehow we end up in a place where we lose our purpose. We say, well, dis net 'n bekleierery die hele tyd, and it feels like I'm falling and failing the whole time. So I wanted to make this theme intentionally grateful, and the reason why is purpose, om sin in die lewe te kry, gaan jy nie doen nie. You're not going to find a sense of belonging or a sense of purpose in this world. You're not going to find it. You're not going to switch on the TV and the TV is going to tell you, you belong. I chose you. You're not going to switch on Facebook and Facebook is going to say, like, you are chosen, you're okay. You're not going to switch on Instagram and say, oh, like, you're chosen, you're okay. You're not going to switch on the news and they're going to say, oh, the future looks amazing. It looks great. So when we're constantly reminded that we're not enough, we're not okay, there's no purpose in life, we have to turn to Scripture. To find purpose in life is to turn to God to say, I am deliberately, I wanted to make it deliberately, but intentionally sounds better. I am deliberately, intentionally grateful. This morning, you have more than enough reason to not be grateful. We are sitting here, and there is 1,000 reasons why we can't be grateful. But this morning, I want you to move your mind and your body and your soul to a place to say that, what am I grateful for? Waarvoor is ek dankbaar? Nie waarvoor is ek bang nie, nie waarvoor is ek angstig nie. Not what I'm afraid of, what I'm anxious about. What am I thankful for? It's interesting that when coming in contact with God and experiencing God, it's different moments in time and space when people contact or make contact with God. Nou interessant, the Bible never says, does God exist? It's never a question, does God exist? God is a given. God exists. The Bible doesn't question, oh, does God exist? God exists. So it's all about when you want to experience God and you want to live a thankful and a grateful life. It's all about saying, I'm going to ask the right questions. Now, it's interesting, like if you go to America, people tend to become atheists and they tend to say that the universe dictates and the universe. And when it comes to pain and suffering, they say it's God. When it comes to the scary stuff, it comes to God. But the future, it's the universe. That's a lot of atheist movements and stuff. I want you to move out of that space thinking, where is God? How is He? Where is He? I want you to start by saying, I want to live intentionally. Hence, I start with a presupposition, God exists. And I don't know how, I don't know where, but I'm going to start with the idea that in my life, God exists. That's why I'm here. Ek staan hier, ek sit hier, ek sê, God lewe. Now I want to ask the right questions. Because our circumstances tend to change the way we ask and talk about God. So, Connie Burger skryf in sy ontmoeting met God, dit net daar gaan. In Afrikaans, sorry, daar gaan hy nou te veel. Daar's hy. Ons sukkel in ons geestelike lewe omdat ons verkeerde verwagtinge koester, in verkeerde rigtings kyk en op verkeerde maniere luister. We struggle to find God because we sometimes have different expectations. We look into the wrong directions and we listen to the wrong stuff. God is a given. So on this path, I need to discover God. And he says, well, let's start with the idea that God exists. Let's start with the idea, how can I find God in the week because God has already found me? So hoe kan ek hier uitstap and say, I want to change my life, I want to find God. So let's start with the idea, God is a given. That is our first presupposition. If God is a given, gaan net daar een, Jason nog een. If God is a given, then, just go one slide for me. Daar's hy. If God is a given, then the choices I make, everything I do, comes from God. Everything I have comes from God. Now, interesting, I read an article this week saying that there's so many people who believe that material things are a sign of God's blessing. Dit is so. But it's not the only way in which God blesses. God seën nie net op materiële maniere nie. Hy vat nie net jou en sê, oh, I'm going to bless you with a lot of things. He blesses you with a lot of other things as well. Like we take health for granted. We take our cars for granted sometimes. We take our houses for granted sometimes. We take running water for granted sometimes. We don't need to walk kilometers to get water. There's so many things we take for granted. But more and above, we take for granted the fact that Jesus died for you. And if Jesus died for you, it means that your way forward is hope. From the day you're born, the day you take your first breath, your body starts dying. So what hope is there? There's only one hope. That when I die, God has been resurrected. Jesus has been resurrected. So daar's hoop. Daar is hoop. Ons moet die regte vrae vra. We must ask the right questions. We must see, okay, Lord, I want to live a purposeful, intentional, grateful life. How do I do that? How do I find you in the week? How can you help me to remind me to live a grateful, purposeful life? Well, thank you, Jason. The next one. If we look in the Bible on how God appears to people, or how they discover God is with them, there are different approaches. But interesting that Koenie Burger explains that God rarely approaches people from the front. Those men, soos Paulus' verhaal, in Paul's story where he sees that light, it's from the front. But all the other stories, God rarely approaches you from the front. He rarely confronts you. Now there's so many stories I'm so excited about. This is Moses and the burning bush. Moses recognized the burning bush. Easy to miss. Elijah, scared, anxious, running away in the desert, sleeping. God appears in an angel, gives him food for a day. The Israelites go through the wilderness. They see a cloud. They see a fire. Rarely does it come from the front. It's as if God walks with you and it's easy to miss him. Dis maklik om God te mis. So, you can go back one more, thanks. So I put those arrows in just to say that in your week, if you're looking to ground yourself and find purpose in your life, don't look for God head on. Don't look for God head on. Look for God on the sides. Because that's where you're going to miss him and that's where you're going to see him. What I mean with this is, look for the small things, which are the big things. Look for the one person that acknowledges you, says you're on the right path. Look for the one person that loves you. Look for the text verse or the Bible lying next to you. Look around you, driving on the road, seeing things on the sides. Don't always look for God as some sort of thing that needs to appear in the future as a prophecy. God walks with you. Now, interesting that story of Emmaus, the story of Emmaus is where two people are walking and Jesus walks with them and they don't recognize him. So I want you to say that, how can I find God? There's Jacob's ladder as well, where Jacob finds God in a dream. So if we say God is a given, and we need to ask the right questions, then we must know that God can easily be missed. God has got a lot of meeting appointments with you. But you have the choice, you have the free will to miss his appointments. Hy het afsprake met jou. Hy het afsprake met jou by die see. He's got appointments with you at the sea. Tonight, when you walk on sunset, well, if the wind's not crazy, when you walk there tonight, or tomorrow morning when you walk, he's got an appointment with you. When you're driving in your car, he's got an appointment with you. And it's not an appointment where if you're late, he's going to take out the whip and whip you. It's not an appointment where if you don't make it, he's going to be cross with you. It's a grateful appointment where you can calm, say, okay, I'm with you. Make sure that this week we don't miss our appointments with God. It could be in other people, it could be all around us, but God wants to talk to us. So God seldom talks to us directly. So he does not only always necessarily appear from us from the front or from the future or he comes with us on the journey. And also when he speaks, he doesn't necessarily speak to us from the front. It's not if someone confronts you. He doesn't really show up and say, okay, ek wil met jou praat, Willem. Jy moet hierdie week die volgende goed doen. Nee, dan maak hy so lysie. Klink nogal soos jy, Jess, soos my vrou. Jy moet hierdie doen, hier's jou lysie. Nee, ek joke, vrede. God really uses force. He really comes to you and say, this you have to do. Here's your appointment. Here's your list. If you don't make your list, you're not going to be okay. If I read my Bible, I see that God whispers. And he has silent appointments with you. And in moments where there's trauma, he shows up. In moments where there's pain, he shows up. In fact, when you look around, he's always been there. You just need to look in the right places. You need to listen to the right things. Now again, I want to transfer it to say that if you switch on your TV, your Facebook, your social media, your Instagram, you're not going to find necessarily voices of positive and voices of God head on. You're only going to find hopelessness in most of those things. Listen carefully. Walk slowly. Walk slowly. Let's take that text of the Emmaus. It's in Luke. Thank you. Put a picture there as well. Luke 21. What's interesting is, so Jesus has died. He's resurrected. And now there are rumors about him in Galilee and in Nazareth. Interesting, I read that Nazareth had like 400 people. It was such a small place that there was only like 400 people. That's why it says, can anything good come from Nazareth? Kan enigiets goed kan van Nazareth afkom? So, Luke 21 verse 14, it says, and they talked together all these things which had happened. So it was, while they conversed and reasoned, that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. Waaroor het hulle gepraat? They were talking about Jesus and the Bible and the church. They were busy with church things, but they were missing Jesus. So God is not only subtly going with us, he's also there when we think about ourselves. So ons kan in die kerk wees hier vanoggend en ons kan God mis. We can be in church and miss God. We can be in Bible study and miss God. We can be in prayer and miss God. Because we're not asking the right questions. We've got different expectations. So these two people are so busy talking about what happened and what is going on, and the story that Jesus walks with them, and they miss Jesus. While they conversed, they reasoned that Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were restrained. Now, how many times can your eyes be restrained? We there. In the week, we there. In the week, we restrain our eyes to see the good things, the grateful things, the things in our life, where Jesus is and how he's with us. And he said to them, now Jesus is walking with them. They don't know he's with them. Jesus said to them, what kind of conversation do you have? Hoor jy wat sê Jesus? Jesus, he doesn't come from the front. He doesn't say, what are you busy with? He comes beside them, walks next to them. And when he walks next to them, he joins the conversation. He doesn't take over the conversation. He doesn't give commands and instructions. He walks with them and he asks a simple question. There's a lot of things Jesus asks in the Bible, questions. And he asks, what kind of conversation is this that you have with one another as you walk and are sad? Walk and are sad. When you're sad, anxious, depressed, in trauma, you tend to think about yourself. Hoe het ek hier beland? What did I do wrong? The Lord is punishing me. I'm going through a bad thing. It must be He's angry with me. These people, the two Emmaus witnesses, the two, are walking merely and saying, we're sad. We don't know what to do. We don't know about the future. We don't know where we're going. We don't know how it's going to play out. We know that our Messiah is dead. And whilst they're in this state of anxiety and depression, and Jesus walks with them, but they don't notice Him. They don't notice that the one who stood up from the dead is with them. And He asks them, why are you sad? And they answer. Then the one whose name is Cleopas answered, and he said to him, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem? And have you not known the things that had happened these days? Is jy die enigste vreemdeling wat nie weet, hoe weet jy nie wat in die nuus aangaan? How do you not know what's going on in the news? How do you not know what's going on in the world? How do you not see the wars in Israel, in Gaza, and Palestine? How do you not see the wars in Trump and Zelensky? How do you not see the anxiety? How do you not see the politics? How do you not see the stuff playing out? Are you the stranger that doesn't know anything about this? The one who asks the question is the one who holds the history of humankind in his hand. It's the one who knows you and me hair by hair. We sing that song, daai liedjie wat sê, he called the stars by name. The Almighty One walks right next to them. And they call Him the stranger. He doesn't call them the stranger. Hulle noem hom die vreemdeling. It's us. It's us. We walk. We struggle to see. Jesus answers them. Thanks, Jason. And He said to them, what things? Again, second question. Jesus appears to them. He doesn't make a scene. He asks, what are the things you're talking about? He says, what things? And so they said to Him, the things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and rulers delivered Him to be condemned to death, and they crucified Him. Can you nie sien nie? Can't you see that there's no hope, there's no future? We had this prophet, we had the Messiah, we had the King of Kings, the one who rules the world. We had Him, we followed Him. He's gone. It's He who is talking to them. They can't see Him. They can't see Him. On this road to Emmaus, they missed Him. They missed Him on the road. And then amazing is, if you read the story, they come to a place, and then Jesus wants to go further, and they ask Him to stay over, and they stay over. And then that night, when He stayed over, when He took the bread and He broke the bread, their eyes opened and they saw him. But what is amazing, what happened there is, kan I volgende toe gaan, Jason? Thank you. When Jesus appeared to them, when they saw Jesus, Jesus disappeared. That was another interesting thing for me. Like, I want, if my eyes open and I see Jesus, I want him to stay so that I can see him. I want him to know that I'm walking with him and ek's op die regte pad. But Jesus disappears. Because you can't capture Jesus. You can't capture God. You need to look for him. You need to ask the right questions. You need to be aware, not about yourself, but the world around you. So first, what we read about the Emmaus people, the Emmaus witnesses, is Jesus was right next to them. They didn't know. Because Jesus didn't come from the front, he didn't come from the news, he didn't come from the what they're fearing, he didn't come from their circumstances. They said he came right next to them, walking next to them. They were talking about God. They were church people, talking about the Bible, talking about the prophets, talking about Elijah, talking about dis kerkmense wat blind is. And when they recognized him, he disappeared. Why? Why did he disappear? Because his appearance and his questions was enough. It's amazing. His questions was enough. So Jesus goes with them. So, where do we find God? Where do we find God? We find him not always from the front. We find him not always confronting us. We find him in the subtle ways in which nature and people and things walk with us. We have to look sideways to find him. We have to listen with both ears to hear him. We don't have to always speak. We don't have to always comment. We don't have to always have an opinion. Because these two had an opinion when Jesus was right next to them. Vat 'n sagter aanslag. We can miss Jesus and we can find Jesus. In the New Testament, there's a lot of contacts between God and people, where people said they experienced God. One place was the church. If we're busy with a course on Revelations, and if you read Revelations, it's clear that God has a message for his church and his people. And that 95 after Christ, when the people are anxious, and they're being killed, and they're being raped, and they're being murdered, God has a message for his church to say that you're going to be okay. You find God in die kerk. There's a lot of people saying, I won't find God in the church, but you'll find God in the church. You can miss him, but you can find him. You find God in prayer, but here's the key thing. Don't go to church out of habit. Don't go to church with expectations. Oh, the dominee has to have an amazing sermon. Everything has to work. The sound has to work. The boards has to be correct. Nobody has to fight with me. Don't go with the expectations. Go with the expectation. God, where do you want to talk to me this morning? Look past all the other things. What do you want to say to me this morning? In prayer is not a versoek. It's not a wish list. God, I want to give you the following wish list, and if you just give a tick on those wishes, and then I know you're there. Prayer is about silence. It's about listening. God, what are you busy doing? Teach me. I want to hear you. We find him in the sacraments, the baptism, and the Eucharist of the communion. We find him in the communion. And all these things, we find him in worship as a fourth thing. It's all texts in the Bible, like when Paul is in chains. He's in prison in chains, and he's worshiping. And then the chains fall off, and he walks out of the house. We can do all these things and miss God. Like the Emmaus people, the Emmaus witnesses. They walked. They were busy with church things, going into church. They were busy talking about church. They were busy talking about prayer, doing all these things, and they missed Jesus because the expectations were wrong. Let's look at the following to say that, so if I want to find God, I have to find God patterns. What is the God patterns if I read the Bible? Where does God appear in the Bible? He appears in relationships. That's amazing because relationships are many times so messed up and so bad. But I'm sure you have one person in your life that you really care for today. Daar's iemand in jou lewe vir wie jy omgee vandag. Verseker. Dalk is dit jou ma of jou pa. Dalk is dit jou ouma. Maybe it's your oma, maybe it's your mom, it's your dad, it's your father. But I'm sure all of you can name one person today you're thankful for. God works in relationships. God works in experiences, but not always in experiences. Because we want to always say, yes, ek het 'n goeie ervaring gehad van God. His experiences are subtle. You know when he turned the bread and the fish, when he made it, when he multiplied it, it reads in the text, it says that they discovered that it didn't finish. When he made water into wine, it says they realized the wine didn't stop. Nowhere did he call everyone to a halt and say, listen, I'm going to do the next miracle. Please staan op aandag. He did the miracles in such a way that it was easy to miss. Make sure your expectations and your experiences are right. Silent, soft, humble. The God pattern is relationships where you can find God in relationships. You can find Him in experiences. You can find Him in good situations and in traumatic and bad situations. That's probably the most difficult of all, is the traumatic and bad situations. Now this I want to say here. Jesus is it's the only God, it's the only form of religion. Hinduism, Buddhism, all other religions. Nowhere did a godly figure decide, I want to vereenselwig as die Afrikaans. I want to be like humankind and I want to experience what they experience. I want to associate with them. They were all too good. Jesus wasn't too good. He went down there and he said, I want to experience what they experience. And God said, well, if you want to experience that, you're going to experience pain. He said, well, give it to me. And he experienced that pain. Physically, emotionally, spiritually. To a point where he said, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he experienced that to say that every situation that you find yourself in today, He knows. God is with you in your relationships. God is with you in your experiences, good and bad. God is with you in your circumstances, good, traumatic. To find God is to live a life with purpose. Walk out of this church and you can decide, or you can be negative. You can say, I want to be negative. You know this country, this country. You know Eskom load shedding is back. You know the world, have you seen the news this week? You know. And we're saying all of that in church whilst Jesus is walking right next to us. So, I want to make it practical. That last one. Thank you, Jason. Here's the challenge. We've got to do it right now. There where you are. I want you, Elise, jy kan vir ons ietsie kom speel. Waar is jy? Jy kan vir ons ietsie kom speel. I want you to, there where you are, I want you to take a moment. You're allowed to take your phone out if you want. You're allowed to take your phone out. You're allowed, and I want you to make a note of what you're thankful for. I want you to SMS or WhatsApp, BBM, wat ook al, email someone you're grateful for now. If you want to EFT, I want you to EFT, not the church. Someone who needs it. Don't moenie kerk EFT nie. It's not a manipulation sermon. I want you to give something to someone to say thank you. I want you to pray for someone. Or you can come and you can light a candle. Stel, ekskuus, kan jy vir ons so nog 'n bietjie kersse bring? Sê vir ons, ekskuus, ek het nou nie vir jou gevra nie. My fout. Maar dankie vir jou. Dankie vir jou. I'm going to give us 5 minutes to do it practically. To say that I want to change my life, to stop worrying about everything and be grateful intentionally.